They sucked the life right out of me, didn't they? Haven't you ever watched someone walk into a room and, without a single raised voice, without pleading or bargaining, simply withdraw, and the very air crackles with a sudden, desperate shift? The power, it's terrifying. Imagine wielding that power yourself. Picture this. You stop. Stop reacting like a damn marionette to every tug and twitch. You choose silence over the knee-jerk response, retreat instead of volcanic eruption. What then? What then? That's the gut-punch truth, isn't it? The moment you become unavailable, emotionally, physically, psychologically, their world spirals into chaos because they've grown addicted to controlling you, manipulating you through your predictable reactions, your easily exploited impulses. But the instant you choose withdrawal, the game flips. The ones who thought they owned you suddenly realize they possess absolutely nothing. Absolutely nothing. Carl Jung once observed that everything that irritates us about others can lead us to a better understanding of ourselves. Now, chew on this. When you become inaccessible, who freaks out? Who seethes with irritation? Who desperately tries to bait you, to provoke some kind of emotional response? It screams volumes about them, not you. A stark, flashing neon sign revealing just how expertly you've been manipulated without even realizing it. You keep pouring yourself out to appease, to maintain a fragile peace, clinging desperately to people who, in your heart, you know were never truly there. And with every forced yes, every immediate reply, every predictable emotional outburst, you hemorrhage pieces of your soul. And at the bitter end of the day, what's left? A bone-crushing exhaustion, a simmering frustration, a yawning emptiness you can't quite name. But I'll tell you exactly what it is. You're too damn available, a never-ending buffet for those who don't deserve even a solitary second of your silence. This isn't about turning your back on humanity. It's about rescuing yourself from it. It's about embracing what Jung termed individuation, the grueling, beautiful, terrifying process of becoming whole, authentic, complete. And that odyssey begins the moment you grasp that silence roars louder than 1,000 arguments. That strategic withdrawal, born not of escapism, but of fierce self-awareness, is the ultimate act of defiant power. So I'm asking you now, look me in the eye. How long will you continue to dance like a broken puppet, jerked around by the whims of others? How long will you react, raw and bleeding, every time someone jabs at your oldest wounds? It's time to sever those invisible strings, to embrace the art of withdrawal, to become an enigma. Because when you're no longer so readily available, everything shifts. You were trained to be ever-present, to answer swiftly, to please relentlessly, to spout yes, even when your gut screamed no. From childhood, you were programmed to believe that your worth was measured by your availability, by your willingness to be a constant crutch for others. But here's a cold, hard truth that nobody has probably ever dared to scream at you with such brutal honesty. This excessive availability isn't a virtue. It's a gilded cage. And as long as you cling to the delusion that you must be accessible, emotionally or otherwise, you will be used, bled dry, and discarded the instant you cease to be useful. Do you understand why? Because constant availability breeds predictability. And predictability transforms you into a tool. People begin to treat you like an emotional emergency button, mashing it whenever they crave attention, solace, validation, and then promptly shoving you back onto the shelf. But you remain oblivious, trapped in the illusion that being present for everyone else will somehow magically guarantee someone will be present for you. It doesn't. It never will. Jung spoke of the persona, that deceptive mask we carefully craft to gain acceptance, to earn love, to achieve recognition. And it is that very mask that fuels your chronic overavailability. You feign okayness when you're suffocating. You reply to texts instantly, even when you're bone-weary. You over-explain yourself, constantly justifying, constantly defending, as if you owe the world some kind of explanation for your very existence. But the harrowing truth is that the more brightly you illuminate the stage for others, the more completely you vanish from your own spotlight. Being endlessly available is a subtle, insidious form of self-abandonment. It's a masked plea for approval, a desperate attempt to dodge rejection, a futile effort to control the impossible, the twisted perception others have of you. But this illusion of control comes at a soul-crushing price. Your peace, your sanity, your very life force, hemorrhaging outward as if it were an endless, inexhaustible wellspring, when in reality it's finite, precious, vanishingly so. Those who crave your constant availability don't truly want you. They covet what you provide: validation, companionship, distraction, emotional comfort. But the instant you change, when you dare to erect a boundary, when you refuse to leap through their hoops on demand, they bristle, they accuse, they label you as weird. It's not because you have changed, it's because you've stopped being functional for them. And here's the cruelest twist of all. The more readily available you are, the less value they place on you. Because whatever is in endless supply becomes nothing more than an emotional dish rag. Nobody respects what they don't have to earn. Nobody treasures what is always effortlessly there. So stop, just stop, and really think. Who truly deserves your precious time? Who deserves your undivided attention, your authentic presence, your active listening? Or, even more importantly, who deserves your absence? But before you attempt to answer that, you must grasp one crucial thing. Why do we react so instinctively? Why do we cave so readily? What lies behind this near-automatic compulsion to respond, to justify, to constantly appease? The answer, as Jung pointed out, lies in our psychic energy. And that's precisely what we'll delve into next. Because your energy is the most valuable thing you possess, and if you fail to fiercely guard it, someone, somewhere, will inevitably exploit it against you. Jung didn't view the human psyche as a mindless machine, mechanically reacting to stimuli without consequence. He understood our minds as intricate energy systems, where every thought, every emotion, every action relentlessly drains a portion of that vital energy. The question you must face is, are you consciously choosing where your energy flows, or are you passively letting the world dictate its course? Every time you react impulsively, you squander psychic energy. When you lash out against petty criticisms that barely deserve acknowledgement, when you retort to petty provocations simply to prove your rightness, when you get entangled in pointless arguments, when you relentlessly seek to please those who fundamentally devalue you, you are bleeding your inner strength on things that offer no nourishment in return. And Jung was brutally clear: that which you resist persists. The more fiercely you react, the more tightly you bind yourself. People who perpetually feel emotionally drained aren't inherently weak. They are simply misdirected, their energy scattered and abused. And do you know what happens to someone who lives in a state of perpetual exhaustion? They become vulnerable. And vulnerability makes you an easy target for manipulative, opportunistic, emotionally parasitic individuals. They can sense it. They instinctively know that you haven't learned to safeguard your energy, that you react to everything, that you're perpetually trying to fix the entire damn world. And they mercilessly exploit it. Jung argued that a healthy psyche is one that knows how to conserve energy within the system. This means mastering the art of saying no without crippling guilt, cultivating the strength to remain silent without feeling like a coward, learning to observe intently before recklessly reacting. Because true power doesn't lie in instantaneous reaction. It lies in the conscious choice of when and how to act. And that's only attainable when you possess the self-awareness to recognize your own deeply ingrained impulses. How many nights have you sacrificed precious sleep, obsessing over an unresolved conversation? How many hours have you wasted endlessly replaying scenarios in your mind, agonizing over what you should have said, or desperately trying to decipher why someone treated you with such blatant disrespect? This is energy, precious psychic energy, being ruthlessly drained with absolutely no return. You're stubbornly keeping ghosts alive that should have been laid to rest long ago, perpetuating toxic dynamics that only exist because you stubbornly insist on reacting. Psychic energy is akin to a powerful force field. When fiercely guarded, it generates a palpable presence. You can walk into a room and command respect without uttering a single word. But when poorly managed, you become invisible, reactive, fragile. and the world displays absolutely no mercy to those who readily give in. Therefore, begin to meticulously observe your own triggers. What causes you to react automatically without thinking? What makes you lose your carefully cultivated center? Those are the precise points where your energy leaks out, and those are the exact areas where you need to focus your efforts. Not to become some cold, indifferent automaton, but to become fiercely selective, to become the absolute sovereign of your own damn self. And here comes one of Jung's most profound revelations. When you conserve your energy, you shatter the insidious projections that others relentlessly place upon you. And that deeply disturbs them, because now we're venturing into a shadowed territory, the realm of silent manipulation. You think you're in control. You desperately cling to the belief that your reactions are conscious, rational choices. But the truth is far more sinister. The vast majority of your emotional responses are pre-programmed, and those who grasp this dark secret can manipulate you with disconcerting ease. Opportunistic people don't need to scream, threaten, or force anything. They simply trigger the buttons you've unwittingly left exposed, and you react, always. Jung called this projection the insidious psychological mechanism through which people offload onto others what they cannot or will not confront within themselves. But there's another equally disturbing side to this phenomenon that few ever truly grasp. While others project their junk onto you, you also become the receptacle for these toxic images. And the more emotionally available you are, the more readily you become a blank canvas for their twisted projections. You know that friend who only resurfaces when they're engulfed in crisis? That partner who perpetually needs you to save them? That acquaintance who showers you with praise, but only as long as you remain useful to them? None of this is random coincidence. They're not relating to you, they're relating to their idealized idea of you, to the predefined role you've willingly agreed to play. And why do you agree? Because you're deathly afraid of disappointing, petrified of not being loved, haunted by the specter of abandonment. The most effective manipulation doesn't erupt in screaming matches, it festers in the suffocating silence of guilt. When you feel an overwhelming sense of obligation to the other person, when you deeply believe you need to be constantly available, desperately need to help, endlessly need to understand, even when it's slowly eating you alive from the inside. And here's the crux of the matter. The manipulator doesn't need to overtly control you. They simply need you to keep reacting in the same predictable ways. But the moment you stop reacting, the game crumbles. When you start saying no, responding with a deafening silence, choosing withdrawal instead of feverishly explaining yourself, the projections begin to crack, splinter, and disintegrate. The mask they've so carefully plastered onto you falls away. And this deeply unsettles people because they no longer know how to categorize you, how to manipulate you. And even worse, they are now forced to confront their own inner demons. And not everyone possesses the courage for that. Your unavailability is a direct threat because it forces others to grapple with their own gaping emptiness. The silence you offer them relentlessly exposes the internal cacophony they desperately seek to avoid. And then comes the inevitable onslaught. The criticism, the blame, the fabricated emotional drama. Not because you are objectively wrong, but because you've ceased functioning as their convenient, infinitely malleable mirror. Jung declared, "We do not become enlightened by imagining figures of light, but by making the darkness conscious." When you withdraw, when you steadfastly refuse to fuel the cycle, the other person's shadow self begins to claw its way to the surface. And this is utterly unbearable for those who have always used you as a convenient escape route. But what about you? Are you prepared to weather the discomfort of being misunderstood, ostracized, or even actively attacked for the crime of protecting yourself? Are you willing to endure the deafening silence that descends after the inevitable rupture? Because it is precisely within that profound silence that a new, formidable kind of power is forged. And that's what we're going to explore now. The modern world is a deafening roar. Everyone is clamoring to be heard, desperately seeking to retort instantly, obsessively trying to win pointless debates and ram their opinions down everyone else's throats, even if it costs them their inner peace. But there exists a profound power that few truly comprehend, and even fewer master, the awe-inspiring power of silence. Not the silence of passive resignation or abject cowardice, but a conscious, strategic, brutally lucid silence. A silence that isn't an absence, but rather an amplified, keenly focused presence. Jung perceived silence not as an empty void, but as fertile ground, teeming with potential for profound inner transformation. When you finally stop reacting, you can actually begin to observe. And through mindful observation, you start to discern patterns that previously remained cloaked in shadow, recurring emotional loops, subtle manipulation tactics, self-sabotaging cycles. Silence fosters lucidity, and lucidity is utterly terrifying to those who thrive on keeping you firmly under their control. Have you noticed how certain people start to panic when you pointedly don't respond, when you refuse to endlessly explain yourself, when you simply disappear? It's not necessarily because they genuinely miss you. It's because your silence steals away their carefully constructed narrative control. As long as you're speaking, you're still trapped within their game, their rules. But when you become silent, you unilaterally change the rules. And that throws anyone who depends on your predictable reactions into a state of utter disarray. True silence isn't the absence of voice. It's the absolute mastery over one's own energy. It's a resolute refusal to be dragged down into the swirling vortex of someone else's emotional storm. It's the conscious choice not to engage in battles that aren't worth even a fraction of your precious time and energy. Jung posited that individuation, the harrowing yet ultimately fulfilling process of becoming who you're truly meant to be, absolutely requires this conscious distancing. Because only in profound silence can you truly listen to yourself, unfiltered by the incessant interference of the outside world. But don't delude yourself. Silence comes at a heavy price. It will inevitably distance you from those who only valued you for the narrowly defined role you diligently played. It will make you incomprehensible to those who could only perceive you through the distorted lens of their own limiting projections. It will likely lead to you being labeled as cold, aloof, even arrogant. But all of this is merely a knee-jerk reaction from those who never truly desired to engage with your depth, only with your readily exploitable utility. And here's the bone-chilling truth. The more you mature, the more ruthlessly selective you become with your words. Because you instinctively understand that each sentence you utter is an energetic investment, and not everyone deserves access to your innermost thoughts and vulnerabilities. Sometimes silence isn't about retreat, it's about claiming your sovereignty. It's the language of those who no longer feel the desperate need to prove anything to anyone. Silence is profoundly uncomfortable because it forces the other person to confront their own inner turmoil, to wrestle with their own deafening internal noise. And this discomfort exposes far more about them than any cleverly crafted argument of yours ever could. You don't need to justify your absence. Your absence speaks for itself. And those who feel threatened by it only reveal the extent to which they depended on your emotional instability to maintain their own precarious sense of control. But the most potent silence isn't the kind that merely disturbs others. It's the silence that fiercely reconstructs you from within. The silence that forges an unbreakable connection to something far deeper, far more profound than external validation. It is within this sacred internal space, utterly free from the relentless demands of others, that you finally begin to recover your hemorrhaging vital energy, to reconnect with your authentic essence. And this is precisely what we'll discuss in the next section. Because it's simply not enough to block out external noise. You must actively relearn how to consciously wield your energy, to strategically choose where it flows, where it remains, and most importantly, where it must never be wasted. It's time to learn to be fiercely selective with your own damn soul. If you're actively engaged in the process of reclaiming your energy and establishing healthy boundaries, you'll find immense value in the concepts and tools I present in my book, Beyond the Shadow. It deconstructs Jung's most vital insights and equips you with the concrete strategies you need to safeguard your energy, set healthy boundaries, and resolutely reconnect with your true self. It's utterly futile to simply understand all of this intellectually if, in practice, you continue to spout yes when you desperately mean no. impulsively respond to messages that clearly agitate you, participate in hollow, emotionally draining conversations, and stubbornly cling to relationships that only exist out of ingrained inertia. Awareness without purposeful action is nothing more than a sophisticated form of self-deception. True, lasting transformation begins the moment you firmly resolve to become fiercely selective, and this requires unwavering emotional discipline. Conscious unavailability isn't about being a cold-hearted, arrogant, or indifferent monster. It's about resolutely refusing to be accessible to anyone at any time for just any damn reason. It's about seizing absolute control over your own energy, your own time, your own inner peace. And this transformative journey begins with seemingly insignificant actions. Pausing before responding, consciously breathing before reacting, exiting a conversation before being sucked into a chaotic vortex. Turning off your phone without any crippling guilt, firmly declaring, "Not today," stating, "I'm not interested," declaring, "I won't get involved." But here's the truly crucial element. You don't need to justify your absence. You don't need to endlessly explain your silence. You owe absolutely nothing to anyone, except to yourself. And this, for a shocking number of people, is utterly unforgivable. Because when you steadfastly refuse to explain yourself, you strip away the other person's insidious power to keep you tethered within an emotional narrative where you are always cast as the perpetually helpful, endlessly understanding, readily accessible one. Jung understood that every genuine process of individuation inherently involves a period of isolation, but not a bleak, depressive isolation, but rather a sacred, carefully chosen isolation, a dedicated time of inner retreat where you diligently relearn to listen to your own authentic voice, unpolluted by the incessant noise of the outside world. A time where you painstakingly rebuild your shattered identity, not based on the fickle gaze of others, but from your own unwavering center. Want to know a truly accurate barometer of your profound evolution? Carefully observe who begins to distance themselves from you the moment you become more reserved. Scrutinize who frantically tries to provoke you when you steadfastly refuse to react. Pay close attention to who accuses you of having changed when you finally start to fiercely protect yourself. These aren't signs that you're somehow wrong, they are irrefutable proof that you've genuinely begun to break free. Being unavailable is unsettling at first. You will undoubtedly feel guilty. You will likely believe you're being selfish. You will almost certainly hear murmurs that you're being too harsh. But this is simply an intrinsic part of the necessary deconstruction process. You've spent your entire life being relentlessly conditioned to put yourself last. It's perfectly natural that change will trigger discomfort, not only within yourself, but also within everyone who benefited from your old, readily exploitable version. Conscious unavailability is the bedrock of self-determination. When you resolutely say no to the relentless demands of the world, you are simultaneously screaming yes to yourself. When you withdraw from a toxic environment, you're fiercely reaffirming that your inner peace is worth infinitely more than any hollow fabricated connection. And when you stop explaining yourself, you finally begin to command genuine respect, even if it's only from a select few. But not everyone is prepared to deal with this kind of authentic presence, because your carefully cultivated emotional absence will inevitably expose deep-seated wounds they desperately seek to avoid. It will reveal just how utterly they depended on your emotional chaos to maintain their own twisted sense of control. And it is precisely at this volatile moment that the inevitable rupture occurs. And with that rupture comes the piercing pain, the suffocating loneliness, the jarring sense of estrangement, the gnawing feeling that you're somehow losing something, when in reality you are simply, magnificently freeing yourself. But what happens after all of that? What emerges from the deafening silence? In this final section, we will explore the powerful rebirth that can only occur when you bravely embrace being misunderstood, when you fiercely choose to be alone, and when you fearlessly commit to becoming whole, entirely on your own terms. It's time to finally understand why the profound loneliness of the strong is actually the true, unwavering path to unshakable freedom. When you steadfastly refuse to be available to everyone, something extraordinary begins to unfold. First comes the silence, an agonizing, deafening silence that seems to relentlessly scream inside of you. You desperately question whether you made the right choice, whether you're being unfairly harsh, whether you're inexplicably losing the approval of those who once seemed to genuinely like you. But gradually, almost imperceptibly, this initial silence begins to transform. It starts to cleanse, to soothe, to heal. And then comes solitude, but not the bleak, desolate solitude of painful absence, rather the empowering solitude of total, unwavering presence. Your own. The resolute solitude of the strong, the unwavering solitude of one who will no longer betray themselves in a desperate attempt to keep others close. And within that sacred space where there was once a maelstrom of confusion, crystal clarity begins to emerge. Where there was once crippling anxiety, an unshakable peace begins to settle. Where there was once a bottomless pit of neediness, a new, indomitable kind of strength begins to blossom. The strength of being whole, complete, and utterly fulfilled entirely within yourself. Jung himself posited that the arduous process of individuation, becoming who you're truly destined to be, inevitably requires you to consciously distance yourself from the mindless conformity of the collective, to bravely disidentify from the deceptive mask you've carefully crafted to appease the world, to intentionally walk alone for a while. And that's precisely what you're actively doing when you courageously decide to embrace unavailability. You're not fleeing the world in desperation, you're simply, powerfully returning to yourself. It is at this transformative juncture that you finally cease being a mere reactor, a passive puppet jerked around by the whims of others, and resolutely become a creator, the master architect of your own carefully designed destiny. You finally cease being shaped and molded by external circumstances and bravely begin to sculpt your reality from the solid foundation of your inner truth. The people who feel distinctly uncomfortable with your newfound absence starkly reveal that they never genuinely wanted you. They only coveted the narrowly defined role you so diligently played. And now that you no longer obediently fit into their predefined box, they simply don't know what to do with you. And that is profoundly liberating. You will inevitably lose certain people along the way, but you will finally, gloriously find yourself. You will naturally distance yourself from certain places, but you will simultaneously reconnect with your authentic essence. You will almost certainly be profoundly misunderstood, but you will finally and unequivocally begin to be truly respected. Because when you're no longer available for just anything, you become invaluable, rare, unforgettable. And make no mistake, this is a true rebirth, a magnificent new beginning. The launch of a life where you steadfastly refuse to settle for emotional crumbs, for manipulative mind games, for empty voids masquerading as genuine affection. Now you will only accept what fiercely resonates with your inner peace, with your unwavering truth, with your hard-earned wholeness. And if you've somehow managed to stay with me all the way to this point, it's because a powerful part of you is already primed and ready for this transformative new path. A part of you has already grasped the profound truth that being universally loved is utterly meaningless if it relentlessly demands the sacrifice of your very self. And that genuine self-love is forged in the crucible of choosing yourself, even if that means bravely facing the daunting prospect of being alone for a little while. Now tell me honestly in the comments, are you ready to be profoundly misunderstood, vehemently rejected, or even outright hated in the unwavering pursuit of your own inner freedom? Are you truly willing to pay the steep price of daring to simply be you? If this message struck a chord within you, if it resonated with your deepest truth, write in the comments, "I choose my peace." Let's see just how many brave souls here are ready to embrace this transformative transition. And don't forget to eagerly anticipate the next video. It's far more crucial than you currently imagine. See you there in the silence.